Hello and welcome to a Bergkamp Wonderland and Arsenal podcast. I'm Gimli and tonight I'll be joined by... First up, I've described this man as many things in the year I've been podcasting with him, so here's a few more. Fat, bold and angry. It's Danny the GFB.
Oh, you miserable little shit.
How you doing?
Tell you what, I've got a winning sock and trainer combination that so far nobody has guessed right. Oh, yes, they have.
You're a liar.
Oh, Robert's got it. First person to get. No, he hasn't. He's put yellow and blue. It's not. Oh, here we go. Mitchell Brown's got it.
No, you're a liar because I got it before we started the show.
Yeah, but you guessed in about 30 guesses, most of which were you just repeating the last one in a slightly different combination.
And as I explained to you at the time, if you buy 100 lottery tickets and you win on one of them, that still makes you a winner.
Everybody's spent £100 and won £1.
Normally. Right, we'll move this on then. Next up, making his second appearance in a fortnight, so the media can no longer call him the podcasty Abbey. It's Raj Patel. Hello, Raj.
Carpenter out.
That's all he's got to say. I think we should move on to the great man himself. Next, this man is currently walking the managerial tightrope, knowing that ABW could sack his sorry arse at any time. Hashtag Carpenter out. Hashtag Kris out. It's Kris Carpenter. Hello, Kris.
Hello, good evening. Raj, you're a bugger.
Well, I've heard that all my sponsorship money that I've kindly donated to the Bergkamp Pirates have gone to the local Domino's for a whole set of pepperoni passions. So I've heard the striker's got a 46-inch waist by now, so sort it out.
That was the size of the pizza they ordered each.
I can't comment on these rumours without my solicitor and agent being present, so sorry about that.
Well, have you know, the Bergkamp Pirates are currently on a record equal in one game undefeated, actually.
Yes, exactly.
So back off, haters.
You're forgetting to tell people that was a draw.
Still undefeated.
Still a draw.
Mutton dressed as lamb, if you ask me. Making his debut as the newest member of the ABW 11. It's our financial expert, Andrew, Mr. PR. Who are you? Hello, Andrew.
Thank you for the introduction. Well, actually, it's my second appearance. I think I got loaned out last season, but I'm ready to step up this season.
This is your first full season. You're like
a new signing.
Yeah, you are exactly like
been
a
out
new
on
signing.
loan.
Just to coin a phrase. Let's hope he doesn't turn into a shamag and we have to fuck him off at the end of the season.
We hope you're going to be more Jack Wilshere after a loan than Ryo Miyachi.
Exactly. And finally, this man has always been a favourite of ours and we're glad to have him back for I think it's a fourth time. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Tim Higuain and a fortnight Payton. Hello, Tim.
Hello there.
And how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. It's only 48 hours to go.
And you can almost smell it, can't you? Right, we'll continue the show by talking about our 3-0 Community Shield win over Manchester City. What a game, and hopefully a sign of things to come. Kris, let's have your thoughts on this performance, please.
Really, really good, really impressive. We sort of set out from the word go. We looked like a team that wanted to prove a point. I thought Arsenal's comments were absolutely spot on about it when he said that it's one of those trophies that one of those games, if you lose, it's a pointless trophy. And if you win, if you lose, it's one of those defeats that people just say, oh well, it's only a friendly. But if you win, you can't really celebrate it because it's a pointless trophy. So there was a no-win scenario, whatever happened. But the hunger that the lads came out at, the speed they came out at, there was a couple of City players, granted, that didn't really seem to be there. Toure in particular seemed to still be on his holiday somewhere. But you can only beat what's in front of you. They looked sharp, they looked hungry, and it almost sort of the mark of a team that had hardly been away all summer. It was almost like the FA Cup was still sort of pulsing through the veins, and they were ready to make an impression. And the goals were all quality. Aaron Ramsey's flick to set up that goal was just, well, I don't know why people haven't been on about it enough, or even more than they have been, because it's just superb bit of skill. And I couldn't really see any negatives at all. It was just a really good performance and a perfect way to set up the new season.
And Tim, many will see this as a bit of a pointless result as City fielded a weakened team. As Kris said, there's always going to be the doubters there and the people that, of course, call it, like I said, pointless. Would you agree with that?
Not totally. I think that winning is about confidence. It's about lining yourself up against good teams. There's no point going on the pitch if you don't want to win. So I think we take something out of it, but you've also got to be mindful. It's pre-season, the players that we're missing, perhaps the appetite from Arsenal was a bit bigger. The thing I thought, and this is going to be important in years going forward, is Arsenal was quite smart in getting us in and out of New York really quickly. I mean, he didn't want to do it at all, but he had to give them something. But how to kind of get back and get into Austria and focus on the conditioning, because City, who'd spent longer traipsing around the States, they just looked tired, didn't they? Didn't look ready or like they'd had enough pre-season. It's going to be a big factor going forward. Do you flog around Asia or the States for 3 weeks, or do you get your players fit so you pick up points in the opening games?
So what would you say was more important, Tim, out of those two things, being fit and ready for a season or going out and, selling yourself to the masses?
Being fit and ready for the season. Your brand, your profile, your potential as a club is based on, do you win trophies and qualifying for the Champions League? There's no point picking up 5 million, and it's not. That's the kind of money you earn for the match fees for playing 3 or 4 matches going around the world, which is the same difference in prize money of one place in the Premier League finishing. You've got to get the balance right, and I think you can do a little bit of touring, but you've got to be in and out quickly, and you've got to allow at least a fortnight for the players to do real conditioning.
Is that something you'd agree with, Andrew?
Yeah, no, 100% agree with Tim on that. I think, obviously there's talk about Arsenal maybe going over to Australia next summer and to Asia, and obviously, they do have their benefits, but ultimately, as Tim says, the brand value of the club and the brand equity of the club is only going to develop from further winning kind of these trophies or big games out at Wembley. And so, that means they're going back to the core strength and conditioning camps that we have in Austria. Then that's, we're all for that. And I think it really showed on the weekend that we did have that edge over City, especially players like Yaya Toure, as it was mentioned. He was just, slapdash. And as a team, they look, miles behind in terms of their preparation. So I think it will pay off long term.
And in terms of start of the season, Raj, what do you think's different this season?
Good question. Sorry. I think what we've had in the last few summers is we've had kind of like demoralising departures. We've had some of our best players leave, and coupled with just kind of late arrivals of new players, we've not really been ready in some ways, and that was kind of shown by the Villa defeat last year. This year we've bought early. We've bought 4 players. 3 of them played on Sunday. The other guy's injured at the moment. All 3 players were fantastic, and we've got more players that might come in. So it's a great way to start the season, and the little silver salver is great to be, put it straight in the cabinet, and let's go for Saturday.
And Danny, many people talk about this as a springboard to take into the Palace game. Do you think that that's right?
Yeah, especially now they just sacked their manager. I thought it was bad enough that Huddersfield sacked their manager after 1 game. He's been sacked after 0. That's unbelievable. But more important thing about the game, people are saying that Man City didn't play a full-strength team with Aguero being out with David Silva being on the bench. And but we had our most creative midfield player not there. We had our central defensive rock not there. We had a bloke playing at centre-back who's barely out of nappies. And
he was good though, wasn't he?
He was very, very good. He reminded me. I was trying to think. Was it maybe a little bit of I was still want to say the bit of David O'Leary in him then, but I can't. I'm looking at him play and the way he's walking around and the way he ran over to where Debuchy was, and then he was shouting at him and he was running back again. It reminded me of a player, and I can't quite put my finger on who it is. I think I need, like we all say, Mertesacker's a bit Tony Adams-ish. So I need to see him play more. It's reminding me of someone, and I just cannot think who it is.
But did you see when he chested it back to the goalkeeper, and it was just like so smooth? And it's like for the whole game, you saw the ball get crossed in, and every time he just seemed to be there. Do you know what I mean? Like just coming from nowhere. I mean, I thought, some people have called him a gamble. Arsene Wenger said himself. We said this on last week's show that he's a gamble, but he looks so good, doesn't he, Kris?
He does. He really does. I mean, the one thing I just wanted to pick up on very briefly about what Raj said there about the sort of the start of the season. Obviously, we had all the momentum in the world last year, and we went into that Villa game, and all the sort of all the hope and all the expectation kind of faded in one foul swoop. But at the same time, there were still a lot of people that were sat there going, "Oh, I don't really know, I'm not really sure." It seems different this year. Something seems almost fresh. Now, whether that's just because of the signings, I mean, Chambers in particular, as you say, for a young man, is really sort of stood out, and he looks the sort of player that can step up even at such a fast pace, sort of at this level. which is brilliant to have. But when you've got a player like an Alexis, like we got Ozil last year, it just lifts the whole club. And there seems to be a real belief in the majority of the supporters this year that if the right player comes along, we can go and buy one. If the opportunity arises, we can improve the squad at any time. And there seems to be this sort of, rather than, oh, well, we'll see how we go, and if we're in the title race at Christmas, then great. There seems to be a real sort of drive this season for people to say, let's start fast. And the squad we've got, there's nothing to say that we couldn't take this league by storm. And I know we're going to touch on it a bit later, but even other competitions as well. It just seems to be a real buzz about things this year, and the signings in particular. Chambers obviously is one that stands out along with Alexis. They've settled in really well. And Debussy as well. We obviously we've only seen him twice in pre-season, but I think if anything, he's an upgrade on Sanya. Controversial, you might look at it that way, but I genuinely believe he is. And those signings can only boost us, and if there are more to come, then all the better.
And Raj, I know you want to jump in there, don't you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, what Kris was saying about fans is that there hasn't been that build-up of frustration for three months this summer. We haven't spent months wondering who we're going to buy. Are we going to buy anyone? Talking about how much money's in the account and all that kind of stuff. We've actually gone out and bought players. And what you'll find is that you won't have that venting that we had at Villa last year. And I would expect Saturday to be a fantastic atmosphere at the game, and everyone's going to be happy, relaxed, and looking forward to the season.
And Tim, we'll go over to you next. And from a lot of the questions that we received on the podcast account this afternoon, many people have had you down as a bit of a negative soul, so to speak, about the Arsenal.
That's a polite way of putting it.
So, you, being how you are, how do you look at it? Is there any negatives that you can pick up, or is there anything that's not pleased you in the build-up or the signings that we've made so far?
Well, I think first of all, you've got to separate out pitch and player performance from issues that, for me, apply just as much whether or not you're champions or whether you're coming fifth. Ticket prices are too high. They're squeezing out fans. It's right that we raise a voice about them, push the club to improve them. At the moment, the debate is about all those thousands of empty seats, which is also wrong. Think if they were given to the kids who can't afford to get in, or all those fans who contact me who want to get in. But somehow challenging on ticket prices, which is something you do corporately about how the club is run, is seen as having a downer on everything. You can be excited about the team and the progress that's being made with the squad, but still challenge on how it's run. In fact, you're more consistent to do it at all times and not say, oh, we signed a player from Chile. We're not going to be worried about those kind of issues. So I think you've got that's where some of the feedback comes from. If you talk about on the pitch, I think it's good. It has been a good summer. There's been work done early. Perhaps it swings around so violently. I mean, most Arsenal fans were ready to top themselves at the beginning of the transfer window when we didn't take Cesc Fabregas and it was all doom and gloom and the manager doesn't know what he's doing and why has he turned him down. And then you get a Sanchez and it swings round, and perhaps at the moment it's a little bit too happy-clappy in terms of overall squad development, because I know for a fact if we'd have done this podcast when the transfer window opened, you'd have all told me the defensive midfielder and the world-class striker up front in the number 9 role were the two most important positions for the club, and neither of them have been filled. One of them not at all, and the other one had to do slightly different by bringing in Alexis Sanchez, but he's not the number 9 striker who plays that way up front. Now, I think it's been a good window to get the right back done at equivalent quality in effect, to bring in a goalkeeper that will challenge Szczesny, to bring in a young talent. It's all really good, but I'd kind of give it a 7 out of 10 at the moment to really be sparkling. And there's 3 weeks left, and there's about 70 to 80 million pounds left to spend if they want. They need that defensive midfielder. They need a really good quality centre-back, because our 2 leading centre-backs have played pretty much non-stop for 24 months. They're going to go in the red zone. They're going to get injured this year. If they don't get injured, they're going to need the rest and rotation. And ideally, I still look at Giroud and Sonogo and think if that's the leading pair for the number 9 role, in a perfect world, you bring somebody in there. So good transfer window. Extra marks for it being done earlier, but to get the 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 for the transfer window, I think there needs to be 1 or 2 more signings in the next 3 weeks.
And Tim, you've never been a man that's strayed from putting his head on the block. Do you think that we've still got signings in us?
At the moment, what would be ideal, what I know they're looking for is a defensive midfielder / centre back, almost, like the player they tried for last year, Gustavo, a player that could do both. You could have put Javi Martinez into that category of, I think he's just gone out for 7 months with an injury. They don't grow on trees, but that's what they're looking for. He says he's never been interested in Khedira, and actually Khedira doesn't fit that role. Khedira couldn't go back and play your centre-back position, and we really need one. It's tough. I don't think there are easy, obvious candidates out there, but one thing Arsenal still needs to do is stop worrying about this concept of value. I mean, he's done really well to get 15 million for, Vermaelen, a cropped centre-back who's not got that much positional sense, and it's probably more than he's worth in a rational world, but the world is what it is at the moment. Look what City paid for the French centre-back. Look what David Luiz went for. If the right person is out there and you need to pay 25 to 30 million for them, but you think, I don't really want to go above 18 million, just pay it. We can afford it. And the difference it will make to our squad compared to Umming and Arwing, when we've got so much cash reserves, sometimes you have to make a statement and just get the player. I think at the moment there'll be one more, if you like, strategic signing, and then on deadline day there might be a opportunist signing if he thinks there's good value in a developmental player or someone in one of the positions I mentioned.
Before we go over to Andrew, who's dying to make a few points, I want to ask you, Tim, the story came out this week that Arsenal could possibly be linked with Edinson Cavani. Do you think that we've got it in us to pull off a transfer of that magnitude?
We've got it in us financially. I don't think that level of signing is something that Arsene Wenger would do, particularly looking at him having signed Alexis Sanchez. And he is a developmental manager at heart. Remember, the players that will excite him most in the squad for the season coming up is Sonogo and Joel Campbell, because there's nothing he enjoys more than taking a unpolished player and turning them into a diamond. That's what excites him. That's why he's gone after Callum Chambers from Southampton rather than perhaps buying the more established centre-back, because he absolutely loves nurturing young talent. So I don't think, looking at the squad he's got and the Alexis Sanchez signing, that he's got it in him to go after a Cavani in this window.
Thank you very much. Some very good points there. Andrew, now I know you've been wanting to jump in for like the last 5 minutes, so it's all yours, mate.
Yeah, no, obviously just bringing it back to the Community Shield, and I think linking it into an excellent point Raj made actually about kind of how the success of our pre-season so far and kind of on and off the field, I guess, has really manifested in the fans. And I know obviously you made a good point about how we had the Villa game last year and kind of just the toxic, that toxic kind of feel around the ground. And then there was that half time, there was all the booing against Fenerbahce in the Emirates Cup last year, I think, which was a sign of, just the frustration of the fans at the lack of signings and the performances at the time. And, you compare that now to, a year on, and obviously we've had the Özil signing, we've had, 3 great wins now at Wembley, got the FA Cup, and just kind of the real confidence in the fans this weekend. I mean, I went drinking in the Green Man before and after the game, and I was speaking to quite a lot of fans, and the atmosphere was just incredible. The confidence of the fans is sky high. And if you compare that to the City fans, and I'm not having to go at the City fans in any stretch or form, but there was 20,000 empty seats in the upper tier of the City end. You compare that to Arsenal, which was a complete sellout. I was surprised that the FA didn't actually try and sell more tickets to Arsenal like they did with the semi-final against Wigan, because I think we could have quite easily sold out a good portion of the upper tier, or at least given some of the tickets to the friends of football which they give to the cup final. So obviously we've had a fantastic pre-season so far. I think Tim's right. There's still some areas which we'd like to see improved, but I don't think many people are they're not losing their heads. I think there's a bit of confidence now that the club have got the ambitions to go and they have the ambitions of the players they want, and they're putting into place the kind of infrastructure to sign those players. And I think this time last year, we knew we needed a holding midfielder. going on to Twitter would have been one of the, the least fun things to do. You just be reading negative comments all day. Whereas it just seems to be kind of this 360 degrees kind of shift in the way in which the Arsenal fans are kind of interacting with each other now, the way in which we're celebrating the success of the club. And, it's great to see. And I think a lot of it is down to kind of just this perceived change in mentality, which is, very much manifest as well with our on the pitch success. About the fitness, we were saying about, how obviously a lot of the players are looking, from having a good pre-season, they're looking a lot fitter. But I was going to say, I think both Rambo and Gibbo on the weekend were probably my two standout players. I mean, some of that might be attributed to the fact that neither went to the World Cup. I think if you look at obviously Rambo historically with his injuries, it was quite important that he had, a real fresh off season. And Gibbo, by the end of last season, looked completely knackered. I think injuries had taken its toll on him. In the cup final, he was quite error prone. Whereas I think both of them were just completely solid on the weekend, and they completely dominated in the kind of areas of the field in which they were. So.
One of the questions that we did have for Tim was from @TC_Goonie, which is the one about the no striker, no defensive midfielder, no centre-back. Can the club really claim it's been a big summer without strengthening the spine of the team? Then me and Raj were talking before the pod, and I said, I don't want Arsenal, as brilliant as our signings have been already this season, I don't want this season to be another season where we're going to be relying on people to score goals whose job it isn't to score goals. Like we've been saying, that it's all down to Giroud at the moment to score some goals. And if Giroud isn't scoring the goals, then I hope it doesn't end up like it was last season, where we're going to have to rely on people going through phases. Like Jack had a phase where he was scoring goals, and then we had a phase where Ramsey was most of the first part of the season, he was scoring all the goals. And then I think he is hopefully not just going to rely on Sanogo being the one who's going to be able to come in and score those much needed goals. I think I was talking to a few people on Twitter, and the question's coming down to with one last big signing, who do we go for? Do we go for a defensive midfielder or do we go for a striker? Then I said, well, I'm not sure, because if we go for a defensive midfielder, then we're defending the defenders and we're not going to get hammered against the big teams. And then this other person, I was talking to his name for the life of me, I can't remember, was saying we need to go for a striker, because if we score the goals, we don't have to worry about defending. What do you think about that, Kris?
I think you're right. I think Tim made a great point earlier on when he said about the project. Arsenal loves a project. And I said recently to someone, I think it was actually me and Jason were talking about it, when we're talking about this Cavani link, and I for one think it's poppycock. I can't see it happening as much as I'd like it to happen. I think Arsenal sees Giroud as the number one striker. I think in time Alexis will probably be put into that position. I think that's where he'd like him to be in the long run. He did it with Henry. He did it with Anelka, if you remember that far back. Anelka came as sort of a wide striker cutting in. He moved him into the centre over time. And I think that's what you'll see with Alexis. But for the time being, I think he sees Giroud as his number one. I think he sees him as the way that we play, with the wingers cutting in as that is his main option. But you have got Sanogo and you have got Joel Campbell, and whilst Campbell's future seems to still be a little bit 50-50, despite the manager saying he's going to stay, there still seems to be a couple of rumours about him maybe moving on. I think the only way that you'll see another striker coming in is either one departing, whether that be on loan or permanently, or, as Arsene said a few times in interviews, that super player becoming available. Now, if you think Cavani is that super player, maybe so. If it was me and I had the money and I had the control, yes, I'd do it, because I think that sort of player is the difference between winning something and not. But saying that, I don't personally think he will. I think he will rely on the fact that we've got the Campbells, the Sonogos, and of course Theo Walcott to come back. And I think we're the sort of team now that we're not sort of like a Liverpool where last season where we're going to rely on one player to score 80% of the goals. I think although Giroud will be dubbed the striker that gets the goals, I think you'll probably see more goals coming from midfield this year. And people like Mesut Ozil, for example, I think by his own standards, he will expect to get more goals this season. And I think he will get more just because of the runs that the other forward players will make. So that's kind of a long-winded answer, I suppose. But in short, I don't think there'll be another one coming in.
Raj, you got anything on this? Sorry, Kim.
That's all right.
Raj?
I'd rather have a striker.
Yeah, any particular reason?
Take the gamble on the midfield. We've got plenty of midfielders, and Arteta could do a role there anyway, depending on his fitness. But I think we need a striker.
It's interesting you do bring up Arteta, though, because many people will know he got given the captain's armband this week. Now, we've done polls from the Twitter account and pretty much everybody was saying that it should have gone to Mertesacker. Tim, why do you think Mertesacker didn't get the captaincy?
I think he just gave it to the man who was acting as the vice captain and captain most of last season. He doesn't put as much store on captaincy, perhaps, as some of us would now. I also think Arteta's a very good influence on the squad. He's going to be a coach manager one day. He's seen as a very wise head. They're very happy to put him up in the mix zone and in the press conferences for how he conducts himself in the interviews and talking about the club. And I think it's just being done for natural progression, if you like. I also think he's stubborn, Arsenal, and I think it's about sending a message. Everyone is saying buy a defensive midfielder, and they're giving Arteta far too much stick. He's a very good player who's served us very well. He's just not quite the type of player everyone would like to see now. That doesn't mean you have to dig into him. But I think there's a little bit of the two fingers from Arsenal as well, which is he knows that there's a bit more stick and a bit more questioning about the Arteta role, so he turns around and makes him captain.
And Kris, you're someone that's going to stick up for him now, because many people have said that his legs have gone. Why give the captaincy to a player that's not going to play an awful lot of games or be a sub every game? What do you think about it?
There's two main reasons that I defend Arteta, and I have done pretty much from day one. He's been brought in to the club pretty much, let's be honest, he was part of that trolley dash. He was one of the sort of Premier League ready players that was able to come in and do a job as an attacking midfielder. He's been converted. So granted, he's not going to be that natural DM. The way that we played in the Charity Shield, Community Shield, whatever you want to call it, that might be the model for this season. We might see him sitting as just the one DM with the two in front of him. And if that happens, I don't think we necessarily need that sort of DM that everyone's crying for. The other reason to defend particularly the captaincy is that pretty much what was said previously there, I think Raj touched on it and Tim touched on it as well, is that he's a leader off the pitch. He comes across very well. He talks about the club very well. He's clearly liked in the dressing room. Arsene obviously wants to hand the captaincy down to a guy he trusts. And I really don't think that there is anything in an armband specifically. I know, like with my sort of Sunday team, just because I give an armband to one particular player, it doesn't mean that he's the only one that can shout and scream. And if people seriously think that giving the captain's armband to Mikel Arteta is going to stop Per Mertesacker, for example, organising the back line, then they don't know a lot about football, because that's just not the case. It's a ceremonial gift, if nothing else. And if we do bring in a defensive midfielder, Arteta won't start many games anyway, so people will probably get their wish because Mertesacker will be captain. So I think people have gone off the deep end a little bit quickly on this one. And I think Arteta is fast becoming the Monreal of last season, where it's just the easiest person to pick on because he isn't as quick and as sort of as popular as some of the other players. So I think people just need to get off his back a little bit and just appreciate the fact that we've still got a very gifted midfielder who, if our strongest team is available, probably isn't going to play the majority of the big games anyway.
There's always got to be one, though, that the team that is on the back of, whether it be Eboué or whether it be Andre Santos, or at one point it's even Aaron Ramsey, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think the fans need
Shamak
to have no
as
one.
well,
Yeah.
Sharvin.
We're big enough not to need to do that, unless it's Bentner, of course, world's greatest striker, who's still without a club. He can go and save Palace, play a manager, win the World Cup. Lovely.
My next question is to Andrew. It was said by Jason in one of our groups earlier this week that the captaincy might be seen as a poison chalice. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, well, definitely. I think if you come to Chris's point, the expectation of the fans, or a lot of people seem to be kind of losing their heads because they think Arteta's now going to be guaranteed the kind of the spot, I guess, of the holding midfielder role, and likewise the pressure on him there from that perspective from the fans is really not helpful. From the sense of just the way in which kind of the perception of the reality, which is very much not the case. I think, if you look at the job that Vermaelen did last year off the field, he was a fantastic leader off the field. I think when I spoke to the guy who writes the programme notes for Arsenal, he said Vermaelen's involvement around the club was second to none, and he had far more input into kind of the programme notes, for example, than any other captain. I think kind of obviously the pressure from the fans on Arteta just because of this kind of, I guess, symbol, which doesn't really represent what it kind of used to, as Tim alluded to. It could be a little bit much. I think, obviously, if fans start to turn on Arteta's back simply because we want a holding midfielder, or someone of that kind of more defensive ilk than he's more of a kind of a deep line playmaker, then it will have a negative effect on him. And I think he's one of those players who brings a lot of experience to the club. He's a very calm head. He's got a lot of experience in different leagues. He's just a very all round good guy. I think that with this symbol, it's a bit of a responsibility for him, and I think he does deserve it. And I think I echo the other guys what they're saying. We really shouldn't just get on his back just because we want a holding midfielder or because he's the captain. As Kris said, is his off the field. I think his off the field kind of calm, composed kind of experience and wisdom, which Arsenal will probably be looking to utilise most, especially with all the young players around the squad. Your Sonogos, your Campbells, your Bayerines. They're going to be looking up to him as the leader. Just like he, when he picked Gallas that time, I think he sees kind of the most experienced player in a pivotal role, being the guy who's going to lead the team forward to success. And I think the fans kind of really need to get off his back. This doesn't mean he's going to be a starter every game, and you might not want him, to play in every game. But let's not take it out on him that he's the captain. Let's kind of embrace what he's going to bring. So that's all I've got to say, I guess.
No, thank you very much. Is there anything anybody else wanted to add to the debate about Mikel Arteta being the captain?
Just means he's definitely not going to go, I suppose. And people just remember he sacrificed his career from being the main man, being the Ozil at Everton, to come to us and sacrifice his career to show a little bit of respect back to the bloke who was and took a wage cut to come to Arsenal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I just, on Mikel Arteta, one last point? My friend sat next to his wife at the Community Shield final and said she is incredible. So
lucky bugger.
He did, yeah.
Cool.
I
was
sat next to Dougie Friedman's wife at Barnet once.
I have a funny feeling it probably wasn't quite as attractive. Am I right?
She was a very lovely lady. Dougie was our best player at the time. And I said, Dougie's brilliant. She went, that's my husband.
And then he tried coming on to her, and she turned around, and it was actually Robbie Savage.
Oh, Robbie, you beautiful human being with
right
golden
then.
locks.
I feel we should wrap this part of the show up at the moment. So we'll move on then. And as we're lucky enough to have Tim on, we'll jump straight into proceeding and start asking him some questions. Now, Tim, a lot of our listeners would have seen on Twitter about Fanshare. Can you explain to everyone the details so they're fully able to understand the situation, please?
Arsenal Fanshare was established as a way of allowing more Arsenal fans to get involved in the ownership of the club. I mean, like it says, fan share in how the club is run, because there's a view of the Arsenal Supporters Trust and many supporters of all clubs in the country that having supporters involved in the ownership of the club will ensure custodianship, helps keep the club straight and narrow, and ultimately it's what we all believe in, we want to be a part of, and it's stronger if we're there. And just look at how well it works on the continent, and actually how well it worked at Arsenal over 90 years, where we'd had supporters, some owning larger shareholding stakes like Danny Fisman, like David Dean, like the Hillwood family, and then lots of individual supporters owning shares in the club as well. So the scheme was established, and largely what it did was when the shares started getting very expensive, it took one share and divided it into fan shares so that you could invest into a financial unit trust type scheme, and as your money ticked in, you could buy units of a share. So for instance, if there were 1,000 fan shares to one share, so if you owned 100 fan shares, you owned 1/10 of a share, and it was everybody together collectively pooling their money to own shares. So at the end, or at the present time, the scheme has about 1.8 million in it, which is collective money, and that 1.8 million is what about 2,000 members have put in collectively, and they own 116 shares.
Tim, I've been a fan of Fanshare. I'm not actually a member myself, to be quite honest, but I do like the idea of involving fans in these kind of things and getting them more associated with the club. What I wanted to say was that when it came out in 2010, I loved the theme of custodianship, that the principle that a football club exists for its supporters, not for speculators to exploit by buying up shares. But what's gone wrong?
Well, what's changed primarily is we've gone from being a plural ownership structure to a takeover with one individual in majority control and the other individual holding the majority of the other shares that are left. It's no longer that plural model, and the lack of liquidity in shares, meaning that it's very difficult to buy them, and the lack of friendliness and support from the club to help the scheme run. For instance, when it was first established, they sent the leaflet promoting membership out in the membership pack that went to 140,000 people. They used to run the Fanshare advertising around the pitch side hoardings. You know, Ivan Gazidis went to Parliament and in the press talk about how proud he was of it. And it really was seen as something the board and the fans were working together on. And then we had an American takeover, comes from a cultural background where you own your team outright, where fans don't really have the same sense of engagement and custodianship, not in the same way that we would see it. You're much more a customer of a franchise model over there. And it's just that the attitude at Arsenal and from Stan Kroenke has meant that the scheme can no longer continue to be a success.
Did you not ever think about, when you first started off, and I'm a layman, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, but please do so. But when you first started off, I know you went this way to doing the Fanshare, but did you ever think about doing a kind of a share split, a kind of 100-for-1 issue? Would the club would have ever backed that?
Several times we put to the club the option of doing a split and encouraged it, and it was looked at quite carefully by them, but I think it would have been quite expensive, they said. And then the period had come where we'd had Kroenke buying a stake and then Usmanov buying a stake, and they were worried that if a split was done, it would actually have increased the number of shares that could have got into the hands of Kroenke and Usmanov. Remember, it was only 5 or 6 years ago that the existing Arsenal board were signing lockdown agreements with each other and kind of pledging, you know, we won't sell over our dead body, we're not selling to Kroenke or Usmanov, we're here for the long term. I think Peter Hill-Wood's terms were, we don't want that sort, we don't want that American and his money in our club. What do they know about Arsenal? I'd hate to see it owned by a speculator. That wasn't me or the AST. That was the chairman of Arsenal Football Club. And so, yeah, Raj, you're right that the split would have been the right thing to do. And actually, Arsenal did do one in the 60s, which is why you come across a lot of people that own 8 shares, because they did 1 for 8 in the 60s. But it wasn't something they were prepared to do in more recent years. Hence, the Fanshare scheme came along because it was a different way of approaching the same issue.
Tim, I've got a question from the Facebook group that was received today. You might want to buckle up because it's pretty straight to the point, but it's very politely asked, so I'll read it word for word. It's a chap called Gavin Smith, and he asks, through your steerage, if that's a word, but we'll go with it, of the AST, do you accept any responsibility for the withdrawal of the Fanshare? And do you think that any of your criticism have anything to do with that decision? And the sub-question to that, do you fully support Arsene Wenger as the manager of Arsenal?
Right, okay, first question is no, it hasn't made any difference. One of the reasons, you'll probably recall about 2 years ago, there was quite a lot of noise and fuss about the failure of Stan Kroenke to meet with the Arsenal Fanshare scheme or any other supporters, which was a commitment that he gave legally during the takeover. And the reason that commitment was made during the takeover was actually because there was a lot of noise and pressure put on the existing board and Stan Kroenke about the Fanshare scheme, particularly, and the fact he hadn't said anything about the Fanshare scheme in the takeover process. And he did add in the commitment to meet, and specifically what was being sought was to meet with Stan Kroenke to talk about Fanshare and ask for his ongoing support in the changing structure. Well, despite that commitment being made, he reneged on that commitment during an annual general meeting when Martha, one of my colleagues who's actually on the Arsenal Fanshare board, stood up to ask him a question about meeting. He wouldn't even answer it. He wouldn't even give it a courtesy of an answer and passed it over to Ivan Gazidis and just wasn't interested. And after then, there was more criticism and challenge of him to meet. But it was quite clear that he said nothing about Fanshare in the original takeover document. He said nothing about supporting Fanshare in the years to come, and it hasn't made any difference at all. He doesn't want to sit there at an AGM and have supporters question him. He doesn't want to be open to the stock exchange. He wants to take Arsenal private and stick it in a holding company in Delaware, which is the American equivalent of the Cayman Islands or Jersey, and run it like the rest of his sports clubs.
No, I was just going to ask Tim, obviously, given the remit of the AST, I guess one of kind of the underpinning values of the AST is around kind of fan engagement, fan custodianship. And given that kind of obviously when it was all created, Gazida said that this was, a vehicle to promote fan engagement. I mean, how do you see this affecting long term the AST and what the AST stands for, and how will the AST and kind of the Fanshare board move to try and maintain the kind of the voice of fans within the club?
Well, the AST has always primarily been about governance, ownership, how a club is run, those issues. And being able to launch a Fanshare scheme was like our dream, the number one objective, because we'd like to have more Arsenal fans owning shares. But that objective won't change. There will still be Arsenal listed on the stock exchange. There are still about 400 small shareholders. There's still an AGM, and there's still accounts that we can have access to and scrutinise and comment on. So although it's regrettable if Fanshare is lost, it won't change that focus or that work stream. And actually what we're doing at the moment is there's an awful lot of work going in by some of my colleagues to try and get as many of the shares that are owned by the Fanshare scheme sold to existing members of the Fanshare scheme who top their holdings up to a full share. Some people have come forward and said they'd like to take on a share. So we're doing as much as possible. And I think, the core remit will remain the same and around those issues. But I also note at Chelsea, at Spurs, at Manchester United, they have supporters trusts who are constituted similarly as industrial and provident societies, one member, one vote, registered with the FCA. But they don't own any shares in the club. They just have it as an aspiration of a model to move towards. So you can operate without having any shares at all. But I really hope that, Arsenal, and it will largely means Usmanov not selling out, will hang on in there so that we remain listed on the stock exchange and we remain a vehicle where you can own some shares. It's just a great shame that the mixture of the ignorance, indifference of our owner means that we're not going to be able to run the Fanshare scheme anymore.
Tim, friend of the podcast, Andy Kelly, who's the Arsenal history expert, has sent me 3 quite good questions, none of which I fully understand. So I'll read them as he's put them and then stop me whenever you need to answer a bit. He says, question 1, Fanshare has approximately 1,800 members. The minimum that each member can put in is £120 per year, which adds up to £216,000. Why did Fanshare have to rely on £60,000 a year from Arsenal when it was obviously bringing in far more than 75,000 admin costs? And why do the Fanshare accounts show the annual income to be around 16,000? So do you want to have a go on that one before I go to the second one?
Yeah, Andy probably needs to come and talk to Glyn Taylor or come to an AST meeting because they run the legals and the accounts much more than me. Yeah. But I think he's probably confused some of the accounts there. How it worked was every pound that you put into Fanshare, there was a 2% admin fee charge. So in effect, 2p of the pound went in and was collected up to go towards running costs. When we launched the scheme, we envisaged a much more plural market and many more people joining. The scheme kind of dribbled away in terms of its profile and its marketing once the takeover occurred because we couldn't get any more shares to buy. Therefore, you had the issue that if you marketed it to more people and more people joined, that was great. You became self-funding because you had a lot more of the 2 pence in the pound to take from people, but then you didn't have any shares to buy. So we kind of have been trapped in this situation, which is why, and the thing that's most frustrating of all, and I think it goes back to, I saw someone asking about £2 million of shares and getting the wrong end of the stick. What we did about 2 years ago was we went to Arsenal and said, can you issue, i.e. a rights issue, very small one of 125 shares to recognise the 125th anniversary to the Arsenal Fanshare scheme? And then what we can do is market it to people, buy an anniversary share. We've got these shares now, put your money in. And the real fantastic thing about that is not only would it have given us the shares so the scheme, could have continued to accumulate members, but when you have a placement from Arsenal, the money goes into the club. So the 1.25 million that would have raised, it would have been a little bit more actually, wouldn't have gone into Lady Nina's pockets, wouldn't have gone into Peter Hill-Wood's pockets or a distant shareholder, would have gone into Arsenal. And Ivan Gazidis was, I've got emails from Ivan Gazidis saying, great idea. And we started to talk about the educational projects we could support with the money that was raised on that well as obviously funding the Fanshare scheme. But then Stan Kroenke took a look at it and just went, no, not interested in having more shares issued, not interested in more supporters becoming shareholders, and it all died on itself.
Tim, you know, you're talking about administrative costs and stuff. I know I've had a few questions from people on Twitter, basically, reading through your documents. You're going to charge an exit charge of possibly £50. It could be lower.
Yeah.
I did ask the question to Phil Wall, who's a decent mate of mine on Twitter. He was a bit prickly. I think he got the wrong end of the question. But I think my question was, what's that £50 charge for? I know it's now administrative costs of winding down the Fanshare scheme, but isn't there enough funds in the bank accounts to do that?
We won't know how much funds there are until we wind down, and we know the process that we're going through. The biggest issue that we have of all, of course, is to find a buyer for those 116 shares, because worst case scenario, you don't find a buyer, then we can't give people their money back, and we've got the asset, and we have to come up with a solution of how we then continue to fund the management of the scheme. The reason it's expensive to run the scheme, Raj, is that it's such an important financial vehicle, and it's also heavily regulated. So we have to be regulated by the FCA. We have to have a financial services company run the scheme. Some people have got £10,000, £15,000 in the scheme. It's not like running the AST where you send out membership badges and take a couple of pounds a month. And, if it goes wrong, like a membership card gets lost in the post, or you need to send another badge out, you can just do it and you kind of run it off volunteers' kitchen table. You can't do that when you're running financial investments. We have to have audits by accountants. We have to have lawyers coming up with the rules. We have to use a professional services company, and the minimum costs for that we found is about £70,000 to £80,000 a year. And actually, I think the Arsenal contribution to that, which was signed off by Danny Fisman and Ivan Gazidis, has been about £40,000 a year.
Right. Okay. Go again. Just drifting off to another side of this argument. Usmanov has always said that he supports the principle of greater fan involvement. Is there anything the Fanshare board can do to speak to him about whether he can help in any way?
We have, and that's very frustrating as well. It's a rock and a hard place. I mean, I think Arsenal fans deserve better than either of these billionaires, really. I mean, it's a great shame that our club came to this. He did say that in that public letter that he wrote a year ago, didn't he? And we've spoken to his investment advisor, we've spoken to his PR company, we wrote 2 letters to him, we went to see his partner, Fahid Mashiri, and I thought, given what they said last year, I was optimistic that maybe they'd come in and provide some support for the Fanshare scheme, but no, zilch, not interested, sadly.
Who are you going to sell the shares to then, mate? Go on, tell us.
Well, do you want them? No, what we have to do, we have a legal duty as directors to secure the best for the members of the scheme. So we will use Brewer Dolphin, who are the advisors. We will obviously be talking to Stan Kroenke and Alisher Usmanov because they have been regular purchasers of Arsenal shares. 1 or 2 other people have expressed an interest in buying them, but I can't tell you that at the moment. We will have a duty to sell them to the people that offer the best price, because we have to look after the financial interest of our members. It's something we'd hope to have concluded and sorted out by mid-September. It's slightly complicated at the moment in that Arsenal are in a closed financial period, which means that their report and accounts finished on the 30th of June and will be published in September, and then the AGM. And the major directors can't actually buy or sell any shares in that period because they understand the company's business. But we hope to be able to secure everything for the membership in September.
You're going to be in a position of power then, aren't you? Because you've got shares to sell, and you've got these 2 huge billionaires who might be well up for buying them.
I don't think so, Raj, because it doesn't. I understand what you're saying, and a few years ago when they were battling for the shares, if you like, in contest, yes, but now it's actually, although it's 116 shares, it's about 0.2%. Kroenke owning 66.8 rather than 66.6. Or Usmanov 30.2 rather than 30 doesn't change a thing at all. So I mean, yeah, let's get them in a kind of arms race, but you see what I mean? It doesn't have the influence that it used to have.
Tim, you were talking about affordable pricing and some of the other results that you got from a survey that you put out to your people. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
And that was the one for using the extra commercial money for affordable pricing. But there were also, lots, as you might expect, people aren't happy about the ticket price increases. They would like to see safe standing introduced. They would like Stan Kroenke to set out a bit more vision. They think plurality and custodianship and the Fanshare scheme is really important. Well, the man that matters isn't listening to that one. And some other results in there, more positive results about Arsene Wenger and his contract, more optimism about the future fortunes of the club. This is always done at the same time of year to try and get consistency, so it's always sent out pretty much straight after the end of the season. But even then, you do have to allow for these waves of pessimism and optimism. As I said, Cesc Fabregas, the first 2 weeks of the window, although I didn't agree, people were like jumping out of their windows about that element in the window. But I don't know if there's anything else, Andrew, you'd pick out of the results of being something you'd want to highlight.
Do you remember what the obviously there was the thing about the Wenger contract. I know you mentioned that earlier, Tim. I think there was a stat on Wenger. I think was it 70. I think if you put.
I think it's 76% in favour of him being awarded the new contract.
Yes,
a lot of people say they don't know. So you've got 19% who weren't in favour of that. And you had 51% satisfied with the football performance in recent years, which is actually a higher score than it has been. But I'd still actually say if you're satisfied in recent years, there's only been one FA Cup. You could say that the budget is to come fourth, so you're satisfied with coming fourth, I guess. But they're picking up as results. The other one is please list in order what you think Arsenal's trophy priority would be for the next season. And 94% of people pick the Premier League as a trophy priority. So perhaps what I was saying earlier on about the Champions League being a bit beyond us at the moment, only 6% pick that as the first priority. 94% for the Premier League. So it's absolutely huge. People wanting us to win our first trophy for 11 years in the Premier League.
Yeah. Just a really quick question. I was listening to our own Jeff and company on Footballistically earlier on, and one of their guys said, Jeff incidentally said it was complete bollocks, but I'd be interested on your opinion. He said that part of Wenger's new contract, there was something negotiated with him which stated that now that we've got all this money that is available and can actually be spent on transfers, that there was a clause inserted into his contract that if he stayed and signed it, all the transfers would be 100% down to him. But if the board felt that he wasn't willing to pay the extra 2 or 3 million it took to get a player, that they could jump in and pay it on his behalf. Do you think there's anything in that, or is that complete bollocks? Do you reckon?
I would have thought it's very unlikely that there's anything like that in a contract with him. What I do think there was increasing pressure from the boardroom on him to start spending money on players. I hear there were 1 or 2 board meetings with voices raised and pressure put on him, and of course he was getting that from supporters as well. And I don't think it would have been written into a contract in that kind of detail. Nice. But I think the expectation that you've got to spend, and one of the ways I know this is true is the Arsenal Supporters Trust always analyses the accounts, and usually when we come out with the figures available, the club just won't say anything or tries to poo-poo it and say, no, we're not going to spend anything. This year, they were out there as hard as us saying, there's lots of money to spend, here's Arsene Wenger's war chest, we're going to give him a new contract, but we're also going to give him this money to spend. They have become a lot more proactive in putting the pressure on him and in letting Arsenal fans know that there is money there to spend. So I think there has been some boardroom pressure, but I'd be surprised if it got down to actually being written into contracts.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, cheers for that.
There were a couple of nice stats as well. I think, around the 90% want to see the increased diversity, wasn't there, Tim, on the board members? So we want to see, different skill sets, different experiences. And then I think of that 88% want to see professional footballer experience represented on the board. Which I think is quite a statistic as well.
Yeah, that's right. And hopefully the Arsenal board desperately needs some fresh blood that understands the game. And then going back to the fun of our empty seats issue, 96% believe Arsenal should make extra investment into improving the ticket exchange, such as having it work closer to kickoff and creating an app for easy login. Yeah. And 80% think that action should be taken about season ticket holders who rarely come.
But don't people realise the club don't give a fuck as long as they get their money? That's the gist of it.
Yes, I think the more you put pressure on them, people said that you'd make no difference on ticket prices, and the AST chipped away at AGMs and with surveys and pressure. the BSM did the march and made a campaign and went on the national marches. And then we had the Young Guns introduced. We have the away 200k fund. We have the split pricing. Some like it, some don't like it, but there were cheaper prices that came in with category C. It does. You sometimes have to wait a year or two for things to start to come through. But believe me, when you consistently make noise and challenge them, you get change. It might not be the change you'd want, but you get change in the right direction. And I think that Arsenal are already doing work to improve ticket exchange. And I think by us putting pressure on them and shining a light on them, that we'll get better change.
Also, one of the running themes from recent AST meetings that you've certainly kind of beat your chest about, Tim, was the home credit system. So it was good to see, 88% of fans polled, support the club taking the home credit system on board, so that we don't have, another FA Cup final scenario where you have fans who've been going for years, and they've turned up, routinely missing out on tickets against, kind of the fans we spoke about earlier, the club level fans who might turn up to just the top 4 games. So hopefully the club kind of take on board the pertinent issues raised by the survey.
Absolutely, and it would also encourage people to get off their arse and put their ticket into ticket exchange, or give it to a friend, or donate it to a kid, if they knew that in doing that it would create a credit which would help them out when it came round to the big games.
Yeah,
sure. I was going to jump in there. Sorry, Tim. I was quite disappointed with the reaction of quite a lot of fans on Twitter. It seemed like some of them quite took enjoyment in the fact that the Fanshare had collapsed, despite it obviously being kind of a financial vehicle for many people, and and an investment for a lot of people, and obviously a lot of people pine for the German model. And this was kind of a hybrid role, and I know it was obviously applauded heavily by the UK government at the time. I think it was Hugh Robertson, who was the sports minister, and at the time I think you also had Jim Knight, didn't you, on the board?
Michel Platini praised it, the chairman of the FA, the Premier League, the culture secretary. But also look what Arsenal said about it. Ivan Gazidis stood up and talked about it being the future model. At the AGM, he welcomed Fanshare members first. I've got emails from him saying he believes plurality and custodianship. I mean, everybody was supportive of it. It really did get the plaudits. But you've got, the American guy doesn't live in our culture. He doesn't have to meet the fans. He's not, there's no way of putting any pressure on him or persuading him. He just wants to own it privately, tucked out the way, make his money, increase the capital value, and one day sell and get out. That's his objective.
I mean, given the kind of the political angle there, Tim, is there anything that the kind of the Fanshare board can do to kind of use its political contacts to lobby basically to the government a way, or a discussion in Parliament or with sports ministers on how we can try and make these schemes with other trusts as well as just the Arsenal Supporters Trust? I know there must be appetite at other clubs to try and increase liquidity for Fanshare schemes.
There is ongoing debate, and obviously the parties are looking at drawing up their manifestos, and all of them, we have spoken to them and they're concerned at the scenario. But the difficulty they have is how do they actually interfere in the marketplace, which is what's going on here. And I think, although I can see the merit, and I would actually like it given what's just happened, but the idea of a political party introducing legislation to in effect nationalise a part of a football club, which would be the only thing you could get, I think is probably a step further than they'd want to take. But it is a great shame, and we'll continue to do all that we can. But Arsenal are clearly going to try and ride it out. But we had also, what was interesting, I wouldn't worry about a few of the more, nutters or aggressive types on Twitter. You see them, but actually there's hundreds of thousands of people out there, and there's huge support for Fanshare. When the statement came out, looked at all the messages that came in from the members, looked at all the media political messages that came in, and there was just huge support for the scheme.
Tim, right, question number 2 from Andy, they get shorter as they go along. He says, why have you made Stan Kroenke out to be the bad guy when he continued funding Fanshare for another year more than his predecessors after it was obvious Fanshare could not pay its way as it had been expected?
No, he didn't. I think he's picked it up there. The Fanshare scheme was, the funding commitment was a long-term commitment from the club at the time that it was Danny Fisman and Ivan Gazidis was working with him as the board, and it's very much that if it wasn't Stan Kroenke it was still the other board members and Ivan Gazidis, they would have done the placement of 125 shares and they would have supported the scheme. So Andy's not quite right there. I think I'm toyed with the idea of releasing one or two of the emails I have from Danny and Ivan talking about their support from the scheme so people can see how it changed. And it's probably not appropriate to do that at the moment because they were emails to me, but I can assure Andy that it was, this is a Stan Kroenke decision not to support Fanshare anymore. But let's not forget the reason that the scheme needed subsidy is because Stan Kroenke wouldn't agree to issue more shares. If we'd have issued more shares from Arsenal, it would have put money into the club, which would have paid back the startup costs that they invested in. And remember, this is the irony, remember that the Arsenal board invested in the startup costs primarily as a way of preventing Stan Kroenke getting in. And in many ways, their fears were correct.
So that didn't really work for him then, did it? Right, his third question and final one from him. Does Tim think that the AST demanding that Arsene Wenger shouldn't be offered a new contract before he proved himself had anything to do with Stan withdrawing support for Fanshare?
No, we didn't say that anyway. And no, these are totally separate issues. It was quite clear that Stan Kroenke wasn't interested in Fanshare when he was refusing the meetings on it more than 2 years ago, and with decisions that were conveyed to Ivan Gazidis about the scheme. I've got the correspondence. It goes back long before the more turbulent times with Arsene Wenger last season.
The board are looking at three options at the moment, aren't they, Tim? The first two, which I'll say, the first one is close the scheme, which sounds awful, but that is an option to you guys. The second is how you can freeze all the assets, but a lot of the members would lose a lot of their investment into the scheme, so that's not a great idea. The one that I do like is for members to donate their existing Fanshare holdings to the Arsenal Supporters Trust. I mean, which of the options are more serious for you guys now at the moment? Have you gone through these three options?
Yeah, we've had the feedback from the membership and also the reality of the options of trying to find the idea of, if you like, freezing the scheme was one of the reasons it costs quite a lot of money to run is people can join and come out when they want, so that each month you have to kind of reconcile who's leaving, who's joining, reallocate Fanshare units, go and buy new Fanshares out in the marketplace when the money has come in, and that takes a lot of time that professional service companies have to do. And the idea of freezing it was that you would in effect say, right, you can only come in or out once a year and we won't put any more money in, but we won't sell what we've got. It was about trying to hold on to the 116 that we had, but that's just looking too complicated to administer, as expensive as administering the full scheme, and most of the members were of the view that it's sad, but we probably need to close it down. But in doing that, and particularly to people who've maybe got not a particularly big holding, £100 to £200, and where the cost of coming out of the scheme with the charges, we're going to say, if you would like to donate your units to into a collective pool, and then say we end up with 10 shares of the value of that, then those 10 shares, everyone will still be an owner of those shares within the AST model. You won't have your personal holding anymore, but you'll still have that one member, one vote concept in that the shares will be available to the wider organisation. And I think that's the recommendations that the Fanshare board will put forward to members shortly.
I've got a couple more from Facebook that are a little bit less sort of Fanshare orientated, but more just to get your opinion. The first one is from Ian Culverhouse, who says, finally Arsenal ended their 9-year itch even, and are in a position to increase the spending power. This has resulted in back-to-back trophies, if you can count the Charity Shield. In every one of our matches in the last 8 years, we've been reminded by the likes of Stuart Robson, Michael Owen, to name but two, about our sort of lack of success. His question is, does yourself or the panel think that Arsenal will get the credit they deserve from the general sort of media and commentary teams, from your opinion?
I didn't quite pick up what they deserve credit for.
The credit they deserve for actually breaking the sort of the streak, winning the trophies, and now putting themselves in a position where they can compete with these top clubs again.
Arsenal will get credit from the wider stakeholder community, other fans and the media, for being a good football team and winning trophies. That's how football works. If you play well and you win trophies, you'll get the credit for it. We've had a good 3 months. We won the FA Cup, first one in 9 years. It had its ups and downs in getting there, but you can definitely sense us going forward. but the credit comes when you win trophies. Arsenal have got the financial resource now. They haven't used all of it, but they've got it to compete to win the title. Therefore, that is the expectation we should have. Win it and they'll be heroes. Don't, fall out of it by February, March, and they'll rightly get criticised. But there's big resources there now. There's no excuses for coming in fourth. We've really got to be competing for. You can't win the league every year, but you've got to be up there after Easter, being very, very close to winning it.
Yeah, I think that answers that one nicely. The other one I've got here is a light-hearted one I'll finish with in a minute, but the other one I've got is kind of from two different people and slightly different or similar questions rather. One is from Sam Gunners-Nutley on Facebook, and he's asked, can Arsenal challenge for the title and indeed the Champions League after the signings of this summer thus far? And to just link into that, our very own Jason Davies from the pod asked me to ask you whether you think that a club can win the Champions League in the modern era that has not been previously, and his words, financially doped. The last team that we can recall that won the Champions League without such sort of financial doping, whether it be through the club or the stadium, was Porto, and that was back in 2004. So do you think realistically Arsenal can compete for the Champions League given where we are now?
The Champions League is going to be very, very tough because you kind of have a different sort of financial doping with Barcelona and Real Madrid. They're financially doped because they have these individual TV deals where they strangle the life out of the Spanish league by selling their rights themselves, and they have dodgy property deals and loan deals with the Spanish banks and government. But let's put financial doping. Are Everton ever going to finish above Arsenal again? Because Arsenal, charge 3 times as much as their tickets and have got 9,000 people who sit in a corporate level. What is financial doping? What is fair financial advantage? What isn't? Arsenal are in the fortunate position with a big stadium and high ticket prices. They can certainly be in a position to win the Premier League if they spend it well. Probably this year, I think the Champions League is too far off. It's not impossible, but those Spanish clubs under the current model, it's going to be very, very difficult for any team from England to keep up with them.
Good answer that, like that. And the final one was a little light-hearted one for you. Stephen the Noise Gallagher simply asks, can you ask Tim what Gazidi's favourite biscuit he enjoys with his afternoon tea is?
He doesn't. He just has the tea, actually. He's quite health conscious. I've never seen him troughing to the biscuits. Or maybe he's just saving money. I don't know.
That's it for me, and thank you to everyone that posted on Facebook. Obviously there were some that were a little bit off topic, but thanks to those that we've had today. Cheers for that.
Danny, I know you've got the last few questions to ask. Some quick funnies for Tim.
Certainly do, just to cheer Tim up a little bit, to say it's not all doom and gloom. At Talk In Out My Arse says, does Tim wear Cuban heels?
I might need to, because I came out in sympathy with Koscielny this week, and I've got a dodgy Achilles, so I'll go and look up and see if Cuban heels will sort out my Achilles.
Right, okay, and the penultimate one is from Craig_Curry, Currie. Why didn't he accept my offer of a room for the night and a Vegemite sandwich when in Perth, Australia? #AFC Sheets. I've got no idea what that's on about.
I don't remember. I'd have taken that off. I don't remember that. I did go and have some drink with some gooners that lived on the main street down there in Perth. It was a fantastic city. A good job Raj didn't come with me. He would have melted. It's 45 degrees. You'd have been a blob by the end of it, Raj.
No chance. There's no chance of that going to happen.
That's a lot of blob, but a lot of loving blob. And finally, from at Carl the Walrus, Tim, did you know that Amanda was at Anfield '89?
Oh, of course she did.
Was she really?
Didn't Amanda go up there and build the stadium before the match took place?
I didn't. I honestly didn't know that. Bless her. Oh, she just got over celebrating her 21st birthday again.
She should bring out a T-shirt range.
Should do. Lots of love to Amanda, if you're listening.
I do. I love her. She's great.
She's funny.
#Gooner Princess.
Oh, bless her cheeky socks.
#Anfield Queen.
Right, Gim, I think that's we've grilled Tim enough and we've tickled him under the chin right at the end just before we passed out from the grilling.
But we haven't.
What have we got to do now?
We've got to tell him or ask him about the empty seats.
Who's going to ask him that?
Raj.
Tim, A is for Arsenal came out with a chart from the Met Police about empty seats at games all last season.
Yeah.
And you had a bit of a row with our lovely Jeff and FK yesterday because, I mean, I kind of back you. I mean, if the Met Police comes up with figures, then you'd think they're right. But the Bayern Munich game, for instance, they said that there was only 53,000 or something at the game when it looked pretty packed. I mean, how solid are these figures, and what are your thoughts on this?
I think the figures are really very solid, and I've spoken to Arsenal about them, and they largely agree with them. They think some box members come in that don't go through turnstile clicks, but Arsenal don't really disagree with the figures. And to give them some credit, we've been working with them over the last year, pushing them to improve ticket exchange, to do more about people that don't come. They recognise it's a problem. There is not one person who opens their eyes who goes to watch Arsenal who doesn't know that some games it is really a massive issue, and at every single game, particularly in the club level and the upper levels, there are lots of empty seats dotted around. There are 600 season ticket holders who came once. I think this is what's going on in London more generally, the haves and the have-nots. If you earn £1 million a year, if you've got one of these 2 million flats in Knightsbridge that you hardly live in, getting a club level season ticket for £4,000 so you can come once or twice when you fancy Premier League football doesn't mean anything to you. It doesn't cost anything. And we're clearly getting a section of the fan base that is buying season tickets to use here and now. But it's really unfair when you think there are fans who can't afford to get in, fans who really want to get in but can't get hold of the tickets. And it hurts the team. You've been at games where you see all the empty seats and the noise isn't as good as it should be. So it's quite right to shine a light on it and get more focus on it. And I think that the work that was done with the Freedom of Information request and publishing the police figures was important. And actually, to give Jeff his credit, he does think that this is a really important issue and has told me that he thinks they've got to improve the ticket exchange and we've got to get more fans into the stadium.
Or you could just go and support your local team. Start giving your money to grassroots football, because the Premier League clubs and the owners very rarely give a damn about stuff like this. That's my own personal view.
It was the previous chief exec of Arsenal, Mr. Edelman, who, when asked about this at the beginning, and I think there's a little bit of truth in this, particularly in club level. He said, if they give me the £4,000, Tim, I don't care what they do. And I think one of the reasons that Arsenal would be nervous in club level of taking the tickets off these people, because they know who they are, they could write to them at the end of the season and say you're not coming to support or take the ticket off you, is they're not certain that there's necessarily someone lined up behind them to pay that £4,000 for that seat. Therefore, if you're given £4,000, they will turn a blind eye if you only come to, say, 6 games in a season, because they want that £4,000 off you. And that is a shame that we've reached that stage.
Are we getting to the point now? I'm sure I read an article recently in the papers that the Premier League clubs are getting so much money from every other source that income from match day tickets is going to soon become unimportant to them.
Well, not so much unimportant, but it's a much, much smaller fraction.
Insignificant, I think the word was I was looking for.
The last TV deal, the size of the money that came in meant that if they'd wanted to, they could have subsidised every single ticket down to zero and still been in profit. That is how much money is coming in now. But what's interesting here, we've just done the Arsenal Supporters Trust survey on ticketing issues, and one of the questions we asked was, in 2011, Ivan Gazidis told the AST that he, and this is a quote from Ivan Gazidis, he shares our concerns that ordinary football fans are being priced out of the game, and suggested that increased commercial revenues would allow less pressure to be put on ticket prices. Now that Arsenal are securing increased revenues from broadcasting and commercial deals, do you think further effort should be made to have more affordable ticket pricing? Not surprisingly, that got 94% saying yes. Unfortunately, the one person who seems to have changed their mind is Ivan Gazidis, who, with his new £30 million Puma deal, his new £25 million Emirates deal, his £50 million increase that Richard Scudamore secured for him in broadcasting rights, decided that he'd still lay another 3% on the ticket prices. And I think, again, if you want to know the answer for that, you've got to go back to an American investor owner rather than a custodian board.
Thank you very much, Tim. I think, like Jerry Springer, he has a final thought, and so do we. So over to Raj for that final thought.
No, I thought that was a very interesting debate, really, and I just want to support what the AST are doing. I mean, the Fanshare board are doing, but along with the AST. I mean, this is an absolute tragedy. That's what's happened, and there's been a lot of unwanted criticism and gloating that there's collapsed on social media, and I think it's absolutely disgusting that people think that. I think this is a scheme that has helped and get fans involved, and it's not working out now. We've got to look at other ways of getting fans involved over the next 2 or 3 years, different schemes and stuff like that. But I think us from the podcast would support everything that you guys do, Tim. So hard luck and good luck.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cheers, Tim.
Thank you, guys.
I think most other people couldn't be bothered to spend the time and the effort to do it for the amount of grief that you get. So, yeah, well done.
No, exactly right. We'll start to wrap this up then with our Any Other News segment, which will talk about anything Arsenal related from this week. So I feel we should start that we've been drawn against Besiktas in the Champions League qualifiers. What?
Bless you.
Oh, thank you. Kris, if you'd like to start us off.
Yeah, Besiktas. I was hoping. Thank you. I was hoping for it. I'll never get old. I personally was hoping for Copenhagen because it's a lovely day out, but that's another story. Yeah, Besiktas. It kind of reeks a little bit of last year, really. You'd be amazed to know that I watch a little bit of Turkish football because I seem to watch football from everywhere in the world because I'm quite boring and sad like that. But they're not a great side. They're an adequate side. They're decent, but I would put them a lesser side than Fenerbahce were last year, and we pretty much destroyed Fenerbahce over the 2 legs this time last season with arguably a slightly worse squad. So I can't see there being too many issues with this one. The advantage of having the home leg, second is quite important. I know the one thing that people are a bit concerned about is the Everton away trip, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, is a midday or an early kickoff on the Saturday after the home leg. After the away leg.
5:30.
5:30. So, I mean, that's a little bit of a worry because I know some people have said, well, should we be prioritising the sort of Premier League over the Champions League? And the simple answer to that is no.
Not this early on.
Exactly. We need to get the job done. Granted, if we go away to Turkey and we come back with a 3 or 4-0 reverse, which is perfectly possible, then fine, yeah, rotate the squad and rest some players. But if you look at the squad that we've got now, there's no reason why we couldn't still rest players. I think people like sort of Flamini and Rosicky and sort of arguably Monreal left back, they could all come in and do a job for us in either of those legs, and we should still get through. So I think you'll probably see a little bit of a mixture of the side depending on where the fitness is. Manager will prioritise getting through these Champions League qualifiers, but I saw a stat somewhere that I think we haven't lost one of these qualifiers in 13 or 14 attempts or something ridiculous like that.
I think the hardest team we ever played was Udinese.
That's right.
Di Natale up front, that was about it.
The Szczesny penalty save and all that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, I'm quietly optimistic.
They've got one of your boys playing from, ain't they? Old Jermaine Jenas.
Jermaine Jones.
I was going to say Jermaine Jones.
Jenas.
Oh, I've made a right Ennis of myself.
I think I'm right in saying they've got an Arsenal old boy there as well. Ozyakup, midfielder.
Bless you.
Thank you. I believe he plays in midfield, and they've got Demba Ba as well. So
I think he scored 3 or 4 goals in the last game for them, and I think Slaven Bilic is their manager.
Yes.
Don't want to mess with him.
They're organised. I would liken them Premier League wise to sort of
Everton.
No, I don't think they're not as good as Everton. They're kind of a Newcastle. They're kind of a mid-table. They'll get men behind the ball. They'll pose us a few threats, but I don't foresee us having too many issues. And even if we do come away with a draw or even a close 1-0 sort of win or defeat, I can't see us losing. But even if we did come back with a 1-0 defeat, I think we'll comfortably beat them at home. Turkish sides don't travel particularly well notoriously. So yeah. Decent draw. Let's get out there, get it done, and get into that lovely world of the qualifying first stage of the Champions League.
Thank you, Kris. Andrew, your thoughts on Besiktas?
Bless you.
Fucks. Shut up.
I think there's not too much to add there. It's just again, I guess obviously last year I went to Fenerbahce. And it was quite a routine win for the guys, both home and away. I think we ended up with Sonogo up front with, I think it was Rio Miyachi and Gibbs either side of him. In the end, it was quite comfortable. And it's one of those. Obviously it's our own doing for coming fourth that we're in this position. But as Kris says, it should be a routine victory for us. So let's not get too confident. But I think obviously if we plan it, it shouldn't be too much of a test for the guys. It could, also give a chance for a run out to some of the players who might not necessarily feature. If we get the win in the first leg, and we can start to maybe get some experience of players like Campbell and Sonogo, for example. It should just be. It shouldn't be too much of a challenge for them. I don't foresee that being a a big blocker, and then hopefully we can go on to sign a couple of players which we might not have got whilst they're waiting for us to get that Champions League status as we have in recent years.
Thank you. Is there anything anybody else wants to add on us drawing Besiktas?
I think Raj might have some wise words.
Far away, Raj.
Do you care?
I'm just waiting for no.
Hello?
Yeah.
Oh, there he is.
Do you care about us playing Besiktas?
No, I was eating my Magnum ice creams. What do you want me to say?
I just saw you typing that you don't care, so I thought you'd ask you anyway.
No, well, I mean, you can ask me the same question every week.
Yeah.
I mean, you will go out and play a game on Tuesday away. That's all I know, and I've got no idea what the first 11's going to be. But I would assume we'll win and come back the following Wednesday and win again. There you go.
But more importantly, have you?
Can I tell you an interesting fact? Probably no one knows about Champions League qualification.
It's pointless.
The Arsenal players, well, they'll be very motivated because they don't get their bonus from last season until they win that game.
Ooh.
What qualification for the Champions League means qualifying for the group stage, not coming fourth and getting into the Champions League. And actually Spurs got in a real mess on this 2 or 3 years ago because I think their contracts were written that if you came fourth, you paid the bonus. And of course they came fourth and they didn't get in the Champions League because Chelsea did. And everyone rushed back to the contracts and tightened it up. But Arsenal players will be particularly excited by winning because they'll get their bonus.
I think you'll find that the Spurs players' contracts are written in crayon.
I thought he was going to give us a fact about Magnums.
I was going to say, Raj, have you gone traditional Magnum, or have you got don't do the champagne one? The pistachio one is a required taste.
He strikes me as a white chocolate kind of a Magnum man.
It's the caramel one.
Raj.
Sorry.
Raj, you've changed, Raj. You've changed.
I know. I kind of, after about an hour, I kind of switch off, you see. And then,
just before you...
I'm not a very good podcast person. You do realise this.
That's what we like it to annoy you.
Yeah, I know. So,
the first time we ever had you on, you got caught short because you were eating a Ferrero Rocher.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe I'm just the comic on this podcast. I've got no idea.
You're leading the high.
I don't know what Danny would have to say about that.
If our fans protest, I shall quietly retire. Don't worry.
Put the Magnums down.
There'll be a march. There'll be a march at the ground next Wednesday. Raj out, So I will listen to our fans, see what they say.
That's it.
Free the podcast one. Has anybody got anything to say on Vermaelen going for 15 million? Surely, guys, this is a good bit of business for us, isn't it?
I have actually. I thought it was a great bit of business for Barcelona, but I've got to say, and I'll say it publicly, he was classy all the way to the end.
Yeah, definitely.
He didn't moan, he didn't bitch. He was. I know the last couple of years wasn't great for him here, but he was. He sent us a good luck message, and he wasn't a Nasri, put it that way.
And Kris, I know you want to jump in.
Yeah, Raj definitely took one of the things I was going to say, classy to the end. The modern day footballer is pretty much stamps their feet the minute they don't get sort of any regular playing time. The first thing is there's quotes all over the press. The agent's instructed to move on, or if you're Yaya Toure, you use a birthday cake as an excuse to try and get out of a club. He was completely classy all the way through, and I think I think in a weird way, whilst complimenting Thomas Vermaelen leaving the club and good luck to him, he's a good pro and a decent footballer. Two things really. One is that the amount of sort of love that the fans gave to him kind of suggested to me that not many people were that bothered. I think would have been very different if he'd have been one of our sort of players or top stars that were trying to get out. So I think the love that people showed clearly is he's a decent bloke, but also I think people are kind of happy, or not happy, but comfortable letting him go. And the other thing as well is it's another compliment to Laurent Koscielny. This is a lad that we plucked out of my little supported team in France, Lorient, sort of 3 or 4 years ago. A big spindly looking lanky bloke who nobody really thought was going to be all that, and within a season and a half he pretty much made the club captain's position obsolete in the defensive line. His position with Mertesacker is completely first choice now. They are the first two choices, and any other centre back that we do end up signing, if you need to sell the idea of being backup centre back to anyone coming in, all you've got to say is, well, look, Laurent Koscielny was in the same position, he's now first choice. So if there's sort of anyone that needs a bit of a nudge as to why they should come to join us to be back up to those two, that's a perfect way to to sell them to the club. But good luck to Thomas Vermaelen. As Raj said, good pro, good lad, and I'm sure he'll do well at Barcelona.
And Andrew, we'll go to you next on your thoughts. Obviously, Callum Chambers, was he bought in mind knowing that Vermaelen was going to go?
I mean, maybe. I know that there's obviously that suggestion because he's that kind of natural centre-back and he's played there twice. I think there's been kind of indication, hasn't there, from from the boss that it's going to be Chambers. Sorry, he sees Chambers as kind of as holding midfielder long term. So and there seems to be quite a lot of internet claims that we're in for a centre back. Specifically, obviously, I know we're looking at the lad from Olympiacos. So it might be the case that Chambers will be used as more of a utility player across perhaps right back, holding midfield and centre back when needed to next season, and that will invest some of the money of the kind of the 15 million that we've received from Vermaelen for a direct replacement. I guess my thoughts is that it's an excellent piece of business by Arsenal, and I think I probably disagree slightly with the comments made by Rodders, Tony Adams, and kind of Ian Wright. They both seemed really disappointed that Arsenal failed to keep hold of a player of Vermaelen's quality in the transfer window. I think obviously the 50 million bid was probably ultimately too much to turn down for the club, and not only that, we managed to fend off one of our captains and best players going to Man United again. We managed to manoeuvre a deal to a foreign club, which I think, obviously Barcelona are happy. I saw there was a poll on Marca the other day, and he's now the most popular centre-back, and Piqué's been moved down to number 3. So, I mean, Barcelona are happy. Arsenal have got a good, solid fee for a player who is probably on a relatively expensive contract. He was, coming up to, I think, obviously coming up to 30. He wasn't obviously a first-teamer anymore. It gives us a chance to invest the money, in 2 quality young centre-backs potentially, with Chambers being one of those. I think it's just a fantastic piece of business all round, and probably a credit to the club and the business we're doing nowadays, that we're no longer selling to rivals. And and to echo the guys, and I think I mentioned it earlier, Vermaelen was kind of the most involved captain in years in terms of programme notes. Such was his professionalism, despite being a bit part player towards the end. So obviously sad to see him go in that regard, but in many other ways I think it's very positive for both the player and the club.
And didn't I read somewhere that Manchester United offered him more money and he still went to Barca, which is, it's a nice thing to see.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
I think that wasn't so much down to him. That was Arsenal putting a lot of pressure on and saying to Manchester United, no, you're not having one of our players unless we can have one of yours. I think Arsenal had his eye on Smalling in particular, which would have been that would have been a wise
dodge the bullets.
A wise swap. But Manchester United desperately need a central defender. But why would they have bought an injury-prone one off us just to hand over one of theirs in the other direction? It wouldn't have moved them forward at all. But here's a thought almost to close with. They desperately need a central defender. We don't need one desperately, but we do as well. Why don't we just gazump any deal that they do? We'll get a central defender, and it will leave them even more screwed.
And on the news of central defenders, Kris, one of the players we've been linked with is Manolas, and I understand that you know a little bit about him.
Yeah, he's been playing for the same club that Joel Campbell was on loan at last year, in Olympiacos in Greece, and you have to sort of caveat his abilities with the fact he's playing in the Greek league. So that's the first thing to say. He kind of cut his teeth at AEK Athens, and he got the move to Olympiacos in 2012-13 season. Last season, I mean, he's a pretty consistent performer, 25 appearances, 3 goals. The one interesting stat that I like about him is 1 booking all season last year. He's not your kind of typical defender that just goes barreling in from behind and whacks people up in the air, which, granted, that's lovely when Flamini does it. You really don't want your centre-halves doing it, and obviously Lauren Koscielny has had to try and get that out of his game. So he's quite a tall central defender. He's only 23 years old. Obviously he had a good World Cup. The main thing that I can see us being interested in with him is the fact that he will come cheap. Olympiacos are not blessed with huge amounts of money. The relationship is good because of the Joel Campbell deal, so the sort of negotiations should be fairly straightforward if they choose to go for him. And the difference between him and the other one that we've been linked with, Fabian Schär, is that Schär is probably going to look for a club to move to that he can get first team football week in, week out. I think Manolas is the sort of player that would would sort of welcome the opportunity to sign for one of the largest clubs in the world, with the potential of knowing that he could get games. He has been deployed as a central defensive midfielder for Olympiacos, so before everyone runs to YouTube, it's very rare, but he can play that position. And he has also operated at right back before, which is another reason that maybe he'd be one that we'd look at because of his sort of versatility. But price tag wise, 8-9 million, you'd probably get him, and he's not a bad option. And I would say he's less Senderos and more Koscielny, so that can only be a good thing.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Kris. I know Danny's screaming at me because he wants to say something about Vermaelen, so you go for it.
Well, he was our captain, and I think it just to show the stature of the man. When he was the substitute in the FA Cup final, the first trophy we'd won in all those years that he'd been there, and he'd been our captain, and he'd been leading the team, and he looked sheepish when he had to pick up the trophy, didn't he? And he was just an absolutely fantastic player, and it's just unlucky for him that he had a bit of bad form. He had an injury just as Koscielny was coming through and forming that fantastic partnership, because you never really would have thought. You would have thought that it would be Vermaelen and one other of Mertesacker or Koscielny. I never thought it was going to be Koscielny and Mertesacker playing at the back there together. And when you look at the fact that Man City have gone and paid 50 million quid for Mangala, who's only played 51 games for Porto in 3 seasons, and when they bought him, they paid £6 million for him. And when you got a player he's only got 3 caps for France as well, and they're paying like 50 million quid for someone like him, and then someone like Vermaelen, who is, is he 29 now, something like that? He's still you could say the peak of his career if he can stay fit. I think Barcelona have got a hell of a deal. They're a hell of a player who can go on to play 4 or 5 years at the commanding position. Plus the game might suit him a little bit better that he's getting a bit older in Barcelona, because they've only got 2 other teams that they can play against in that league. And I'm just really sad to see him go, because he should have been one of our all-time greatest centre-backs, but because one thing and another, it turns out that he's going to be maybe not quite like Arshvin, or the one that got away, but I'll always have fond memories of him, and I'm really sad to see him go. But I'm delighted that we got 15 million quid, because I'm sure around the Christmas window, the January window, we were looking at 5 to 6 million for him.
He's going to pick up cards, isn't he?
Hey?
I said he's going to pick up cards in Spain, though, isn't he? I think. Yeah. I think his tackling is not. He might struggle a little bit at first to adapt to the kind of the refereeing there slightly, but.
I think his positional ability is the thing that's probably going to affect him the most in Spain.
Plus he had such a poor World Cup as well, because he thought his value would go down even more, but he's getting 15 million. That's a hell of a deal. And I think someone said he was on he was on about 70 grand a week, so that's going to be freed up. But as long as we spend that money on another decent player, we've got so much money. Like we've the young player that Henry Lansbury, we've had money come in from him, and Fabregas, and who was the other one we got money in from? Vea. So look at all this extra money that none of us thought we'd be getting in as soon as this in the summer, and all this extra money. So there's plenty there, and he freed up so much money in wages as well. So I think maybe we've got one big signing to come. Wenger's always looking a bit cheeky. I think we got one.
Let's hope.
What's our net spend so far? What's our transfer net spend? 25 million, 30 million? We haven't spent that much.
I think it was something like So I saw a tweet somewhere around about 54 or something like that. I don't know if that's right, but.
You've got to take Vermaelen off that. You've got to take Vermaelen off. It's about 35 to 40 million, I think.
You're taking Vermaelen off. Yeah, that makes sense.
We spent 62.5 and we've sold 30. So that's 32.3 million.
Let's be honest, if the right one comes available, the money's there, isn't it? We can't hide that anymore.
Money. Remember that the cash reserves were 200 million on the 1st of June. Now, they have to keep some of that back for servicing the debt and for paying the bills over the months to come. But they had a transfer kitty comfortably of 100 million, edging up towards 120 million. You've said what we've spent. They could still spend 70 million on players this window and be comfortable.
Tim, do you think they've got a massive big room like Count Dracula does full of gold coins? Did they ever let you in?
Rubies and chests of treasure.
Did they ever let you go in there and touch any of it?
It's funny to say, last year I seem to wind quite a lot of people up.
No shit.
Yeah, I know. I did this tweet. I said, breaking news. Arsenal have made a new signing. I'll tell you soon. And an hour later, I said, I can exclusively reveal that Arsenal have signed a vault. No, people didn't appreciate it, funnily enough. I thought it was quite funny. It must be huge. I mean, Barclays must love them, because that's where it sits. I wonder what interest rate he's getting. Perhaps it's all in premium bonds. I don't know.
They're fucking useless. I've got a fair few pounds worth in that of one bugger all in 5 years.
Well, Tim's talking about all this money that we've got sat in the vault. I know one of the players we've been linked with is Cavani. Earlier I asked him if he thought it was possible.
300 grand a week, yes, certainly.
But Kris actually has a little bit about his situation at Paris Saint-Germain.
Yeah, I've been speaking to our friend of the pod, French John, and a couple of other people that have got 2 English-speaking people in France, and just trying to get an idea of what's going on over there. There was a big story that came out a while ago about his agent essentially just flirting with clubs and saying, yeah, he's available, blah, 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 blah. The situation Paris Saint-Germain have got themselves in is that they fully expected to sell Ezekiel Lavezzi to balance their FFP issue when they signed David Luiz for £50 million. And the situation they're in now is that they need to ship out one of their big assets. They're not going to get rid of Zlatan, who would. They're struggling to sell or find suitors for Lavezzi. Liverpool are still sniffing around, but being Liverpool, they haven't made a firm offer, and there's talk that that isn't going to come in. And they tried to get rid of him to Napoli, who are still too keen on Fellaini. So all of that kind of winds up in that it's one of 3. It's Thiago Silva. It's Marco Verratti or Edison Cavani. Thiago Silva is going nowhere. Verratti would cost an awful lot of money, and there's not many teams that could realistically pay it, Real Madrid being one, and they've got plenty of options in that position, so I doubt whether they're going to come in. So of those players that are available, Cavani's probably the one likely, and it's interesting that Danny said about the 300k a week. From what I've been told, or from what is going on in France at the moment, the talk is that just simply to get him off the wage books at PSG, they would be willing to keep a segment or a part of his contract held essentially with them, i.e. on the wages side. So the fee wouldn't be particularly high, and Cavani would drop his wage demands significantly to move. Now, whether that's significantly enough to bring it into the wage structure we've got, I'd say that's 50-50. But he could end up coming across to the English Premier League for in the region of between £140,000 a week, which is pretty much half what he's on. And it would almost be like us with the sort of situation like we had with Vela, where there's that option to return, which I don't think he's ever going to. But essentially, PSG are willing to do whatever it takes to move him on if the right offer comes available. And they've got plenty of strikers. They don't really need him, and they play him. Anyone that's seen PSG, they play him well out of position. He plays wide of a front 3.
Which is why he didn't score many goals last season.
Exactly.
And he was injured and had the ump.
Precisely.
When he get about 15 last season for a player that in the French League On should be getting 30, 40 goals a season. He's that good, and that league is so poor. The simple fact is, in a team that has Zlatan Ibrahimovic, you will always play second fiddle, and you will not play through the middle unless Zlatan's injured. And this is a guy that pretty much plays every week. So the only thing to really mention is that anyone that's talking about, oh yeah, Arsenal couldn't afford the fee, it'd be 50 million this, 50 million that. If the right offer comes in and the right availability to move him on comes, PSG will sell him. It's just whether we make a move, and I pray to God he doesn't end up at Liverpool, because he would get a shitload in that side. And who's top of Ligue 1 at the moment, Kris?
Well, I won't bore everyone with that, Danny, but a certain team I follow might be up there. They might have beaten Monaco away last weekend. So.
Yeah, but who's top on goal difference?
Is it Can, Danny?
It might well be.
Oh, very
might
good.
have felt, and who scored? I told you he'd score when he scored 2.
Yes, you did. Yes,
man.
move on.
Yeah, save this for
Fantastic.
our private chats.
Right then, I've just got to announce the
Omar.
competition, which is courtesy of @ALSNOTNUTZ, which is, I take it as Al's Not Nuts, although me and Danny have been talking about how to pronounce that, haven't we, Dan?
And a certain young gobby lady was shouting at us like we were fools, and I think she might have had a point.
I think she might have had a point. So that's Al's Not Nuts, nuts with a Z. To win a Brian Moore frame from the website, just follow them and tweet, it's not Arsenal, it's the Arsenal. But you must be following them. So go and give them a follow, and they will pick one of you from random to win the competition prize. Danny, we have news of last week's competition winners.
We certainly do. The lovely people at Greg at GNR Books. I hope it's GNR. Last week we had 2 copies of Stuck in the Moment, The Ballad of Paul Vasson, which is available on Amazon and all good booksellers and some shitty booksellers, to give away. And the question was, what number was he wearing on when that night that he scored that goal against Juventus? It was number 13 because he came on as sub. And the first winner was at AFC_Tone from Plymouth in England. He got it right at 12:32 a.m. The next winner was Joe Madge from Bedford in England, and that was at 1:02 a.m. And you two, I'll be sending your details to Greg at GNR Books, or it could be GCNR. Anyway, there's some people who make books who are kind enough to give us the books, and they're going to get them sent off to you. And just for a couple of runners up who get nothing other than a mention, 3rd place was N. Alexander from London, hello, and 4th was Brian Osieka from Oklahoma, USA. How dare you enter a competition with Osieka from Oklahoma, USA.
And also, we've got next week's competition, which is courtesy of VCC Designs on Twitter, at VCC Designs, and they're going to be giving us a Thierry Henry spray piece of art, and that's for next week. But competition
that's not by Thierry Henry, by the way.
No, that's by them, but I've already seen the picture of it. We will put a picture of it on the pod account. It's very, very good indeed. I might even enter myself. Is there rules against that?
Well, we can soon bend them.
Yes.
Well, I've got a couple of books from last week, and I've got a lovely painting from this week I can sort you out with.
I've still got half of the donation money. No, I haven't really. I jest.
like we'd let you anywhere near it.
No, we'll cut this out.
No, we won't.
Right then, we'll end as always with shout outs and predictions for Crystal Palace on Saturday. Danny, if I could have your prediction, please.
Well, a new feature for this season, we're going to have a listeners team where one week we're going to get one of you beautiful listeners that follow us on Twitter to do a prediction. We're going to ask a little question, and then whichever one gets the answer right, then first is the person we're going to ask you to make a prediction, and then you can take on the rest of us, 11 or however many are doing it, because I'm never too sure, and with the fantasy football as well. So I think because Pulis has just left Crystal Palace because, I don't know, he signed one Scouser and he's done a run, he's signed that Kelly bloke, haven't they? I think it's going to be an embarrassing 4-0 to us. And the first goal scorer is going to be, Sanchez is going to send the place wild.
Okay, Raj next.
I think now that Pulis has been sacked, it's going to be 5-0. I was going to say 3-0, but it's going to be 5-0 now, and I think Aaron Ramsey will score the first goal.
Fantastic. Chris?
I will go 4-1. I think they'll probably get one back, as customary. Just to be different, I will say Koscielny first scorer.
Okay. And Andrew?
Well, I was going to go 4-0, and then I was going to have to go 5-0, so I'm pretty screwed. So I'm going to have to go 4-1, I think. I think with Palace losing Digachoy in midfield, the holding midfielder there, and they haven't really replaced him. I think, with the way our midfielder play right now, it's going to be a goal fest for us. And my first goal scorer is going to be Santi Cazorla.
Fantastic.
Santi.
And Tim, go on, let's have yours.
I think it will be 3-0 to Arsenal, and the first goal scorer will be Jack Wilshere.
Fantastic.
God, do you reckon he'll even play? That's a surprise. Go on, Tim.
He played well on Sunday.
Well,
it's Tim. He likes to be a bit different. I'm going 3-0 Arsenal, Giroud. Fantastic. And we'll end with some shout outs. So we'll go back to 4th then. And Tim?
Shout out what?
Anything you want.
Absolutely anything.
Leave me alone.
Carpenter out!
Oh, God.
Haters, shout out
Shout
your
out.
haters.
I can shout. Everyone I'll meet in Istanbul for the Vesticas game.
Bless you.
Let's have a beer together.
And they pay because you haven't just come into £200 million.
Andrew?
Shout out to all the fans at the Arsenal game last week. You're fantastic, especially all those who were at the Green Man singing their hearts out for the Arsenal with the away boys as ever.
Fantastic. Chris?
3 quickies for me. 2 of the Carpenter Out Brigade. Yeah.
3?
We've
limited this shit to 1. You get 1.
I'm being greedy. All right, I'll
Carpenter out.
Out. In.
Carpenter out. Honestly.
In.
Pepperoni
He's in.
passion.
Two of the Carpenter Out Brigade that have amused me greatly in the last 2 weeks have been Paul Swain, who's at Paul Swain AFC 78, and also at Noob Gooner, who hasn't got anywhere near as many followers as he should have. He's only got 47, so please follow him as well, please.
That's travesty.
Believers of Carpenter Out.
I have no words. The other one is, and this is a serious one, a really massive thank you to a chap called Greg Birch, who is at Greg Birch 1982. He's got a huge collection of Arsenal shirts, well over a couple of thousand. Visit his Twitter page and you'll have a look at those. He's very kindly donated an Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain shirt to me to give away for our Barbican Pirates draw, which is going to be happening tomorrow, I believe. Me and Danny are going to sort that out.
Certainly are.
So I just want to give a massive shout out to Greg and thank you for that. It is a shirt that's worth at least a couple of £100, if not more. It was
very nice.
It was match worn in the Carling Cup game last year against City, I believe it was. Sorry, a couple of years back against City. So yeah, huge thank you to Greg, and he is a massive shirt collector. So if there's anybody that's got any particularly rare shirts that might want to help him out in growing his collection, just give him a quick follow and give him some love. And thank you very much again.
Yes. He was one of the guys that gave us the Kieran Gibbs shirt when we did our competition, and all prize money went to Marie Curie. Top man, I have to say. Raj, you next.
My one this week is to @Arsenal Vision, who calls himself Mean Lean, and the only reason I'm giving him a shout out because he came up with some little known Karate Kid quotes on Twitter today, which made me laugh, and so he deserves my one today.
And Danny?
My one is going to go, I did a little competition. What colour socks and trainers am I wearing?
If I don't get this, I'm going to punch you in the face.
The first person to get it, he had 2 guesses, 3, possibly 4, maybe 5. It was Mitchell Brown, who is at Crazy Aussie 13. That's CrazyOzzie13. So you can go and follow him if you want. And the answer was light powder blue Adidas trainers with lime green Puma socks. Oh, tell you what, I'm a fucking rainbow on wheels.
But technically, it was me that got it right first.
With 50 guesses.
Yes, that's at Gooner Gimli. My shout out this week goes to @Awesome Gooner, who correctly guessed what flavour super noodles I had for lunch, and it was bacon, and I ate them thinking of you, Danny, because it was quite similar, you being porky and then being bacon.
There you are. I'm down to a slim 18 stone 6 recently.
I did get caught. Did enjoy being called a chicken though, over 20 times. This is good. I like this. Right then, all that's left is really to thank all of you boys on the show tonight.
Pleasure.
It's been an absolute. Isn't we got one other thing? The music thing, you silly tit.
Oh, go on then.
How many times have I put that there? You go and get in the naughty Gimli corner on your step.
I know, but I was reading what my shout out and the things were.
Don't you go making excuses now, boyo. Yeah. Well, we're going to try and promote music, and like we've been promoting the art stuff by giving away art stuff that people have, Arsenal fans have done. We're doing the same with music. So if you do your own music, not covers, and you're in a band or anything like that, let us know, and we can sometimes use your music if you give us permission at the end of the podcast. So this week, the first one we've ever done is by a band called Screen Riot. They're from Chicago in America, and the song is called Cosmetic, and the band members are Omar, who I talked to, who's the Arsenal fan, Adam, Steve and Paulie. And if you go and have a look at our website, www.bergkampwonderland.co.uk, you will see a link to their website, and you will see their YouTube video of this song. So if anybody else does this, not necessarily covers, because covers you don't own the rights to, but stuff that you own the rights to and you can give us permission to do, otherwise YouTube will come around and find me and smack me on my hairy body, and I don't want that.
Fantastic. So that was a Bergkamp Wonderland podcast. Thank you very much for listening, and keep it Arsenal. Good night.
Nanu, nanu, Mr. Williams. Nanu, nanu.
Clap your
He's gone again.
Oh, mingy little tit.
He's a bit of a ginger. Let's just talk about him for the next 2 minutes while he's off.
Can't do that.
Let's tell the world everything about him.
He'll sack. There's nothing to tell.
He's Welsh. He's ginger.
And,
he's gone. He's gone as well.
I think you just need to give him a couple of minutes to reset his thing, his router.
And don't edit this out. let the world know. No. Let the world know the Welshness of this guy.
Well, he's had about 4 years of that on Twitter, so I think the entire world already knows.
What's that story about the sheep?
I would say that's Jason, but I'm not going to say any such thing.
So, I mean, what do we do?
I'll just edit this out after. He's probably going to send me a message on WhatsApp any second now.